Welcome everyone to another Motorsport Manager video. Now this video is going to start a new direction for my coverage of the game. So if you've been following along on the channel, you'll know that we just finished up our Let's Play series. In our last video, we finally won the Tier 1 championship. So we went through the Let's Play series into Tier 3, won that championship, Tier 2, won that championship, and then finally we ended by winning the Tier 1 championship. So I've been experimenting with some things since I finished up the recording of that series, and what I've been working on is modding. Now, modding is nothing new for me. It's something I've been doing in one way or another for well over 10 years now, I guess. As odd as that is for me to have to say, it's probably going on closer to 15 years now, if we go back to NR 2003 and some of the other games. But so modding is something that I'm very familiar with, and this game was from the start planned to have mods, and you can tell that by the fact that Workshop is over here toward the bottom right-hand corner of the screen. There's a section already ready to go for it, and this is where you would download and install various mods from the Workshop, but as you can see on the screen, it is not ready yet. It is showing as coming soon, and our best estimation, as far as I can tell, is that this is coming in February. Now, unfortunately, we don't really know if that's coming toward the beginning of the month or toward the end of the month, but we've just been given the information that it's coming in February. I'm obviously hoping it comes toward the beginning of the month. But once that happens, mods are going to be all over the place, I have a feeling, because generally with Workshop integration to a game, the developers open up a lot of the game to the mods and allow you to change a lot of the most basic aspects of the game. Now, some of the things that I'm hoping for, just like many other people, for this game is being able to mod in new tires, new cars, new tracks, new series, new everything. So that for me, I'd like to be able to run either prototypes, GT series, NASCAR type stuff, you name it. I'd like to have options. That's the biggest thing for me. I don't like it when you're stuck having to play a game exactly the way the developers want you to play it. How about the developers give us the tools and let us play it the way we want? And that way, everybody gets to be happy because they get to play it their way. So what you're going to see in this video is some of the work that I've done in being able to play the game that I want to play it. Now, the good news for me is there's a lot of this game that is already open to modding if you simply have a few tools under your belt and a basic knowledge of how to find various files on your computer. So with that being said, keep in mind that nothing you're going to see in this video as I take you through the inside the game aspect of my changes, none of this was very hard to do. It's simply a matter of taking the time to learn just where to go, where to look, and a few programs you're going to need to make some changes. Now, there are no graphical changes that you're going to see in the game. None of the sponsor logos, none of the team logos, none of the driver names, any of that stuff is going to look different. All of the track models, all of that stuff is the same. Okay, what I'm most interested in is the gameplay itself. When I'm modding a racing game, I'm interested in modeling how the car drives. I'm not interested in what the trees look like, for example. And the same thing goes here. I'm interested in how the game plays and how much fun that I can have with the game rather than necessarily how it looks. There are tons of people out there who can do 100 times better at making the game look better than I can, so I leave it up to them and keep out of it. So we're going to start taking a look at some of the changes by starting a new career. Now, you're going to need to start a new career for any of these changes to take effect. In fact, I wouldn't recommend doing any modding as long as you have files, save files that you're still playing from the default, just because of, possibilities are endless for errors that could happen. And I hate to see somebody ruin a career that they've been working on for multiple seasons because of some mods. So keep in mind, what you see here, all of my save files have been moved to a separate folder. So this is a clean game for me. So let's go ahead and start with a new career because that is the easiest way for me to begin showing you some of the things that I've done. Again, this video is going to be about showing you in the game what some of the changes entail. And then future videos will go more in depth behind the scenes where I'll actually show you the files that you would need to edit to make the changes, whether they're the same changes that I'm making or different changes that I'm making. I'll show you the files where this all happens so you can do it to your own taste. So we'll start with the session length. Now we've got some text down here. This is default text. These numbers are no longer accurate because I have changed the length of the races. The game determines the length of the races in miles, not laps. So, and the reason they do that is because if you say you want a 100-mile race, then it simply looks at, okay, it says, okay, you want a 100-mile race. We'll look at the length of the track, which is 2 miles, 2.5 miles, etc. And then it determines the number of laps. So at this point, these are the default numbers. So they do not uh, follow the changes that I have made. So what I've done is, and I've done quite a bit of testing with this just to see sort of what I enjoyed and what some things were and how they worked. So right now I have short races on 70-mile races, medium are 150, and then the long races are 250 miles, which is quite a length for a race in this particular game. But it succeeded in testing, how far can we go with these? And so far, I've done up to, I believe it was a 500-mile race in testing here. So you can get some longer races. And of course, for those of you who are into NASCAR, you'll know 500 miles is the length of a lot of the races there. So we're going to turn the tutorial off. We don't need that. And I'm going to leave it at short sessions. Now, one thing to keep in mind is the game uses sort of an initial length for a race and then a modifier. You start out with the initial length, which, as I told you, that I have set up, 70, 150, and 250, I believe, are the numbers I'm using now. But then each of the different tiers, the series, can modify that. So what we'll see coming up here in just a second, let's say, in fact, I'm going to actually play this out. So I'm going to go ahead and put my information in. There we go. And I'm going to use, now if you remember from the Let's Play series, I started with no bonuses because I didn't want any advantages whatsoever in the game. But now I'm going to choose what my background is in real life, which is financial. I have quite a bit of experience with payroll and accounting. So I'm going to choose the financial background, which will give me a little bit of a benefit on the money side of things, both the cost as well as the income side of things. So that'll be good. That'll help me out a little bit, and we'll go ahead and move forward. Now, here's where we're going to be able to see most of the changes I made. And they relate to how I wanted to play the different tiers. I wanted tier 3 to be all about team and driver development, not car development. Okay, I wanted basically tier 3 to give you a chance to get acclimated to the game if you're new to it. And then I wanted the ability to say tier 3 is all about scouting drivers, finding drivers that you want to get on your team and then help to improve their stats over the seasons as you continue to move up to tier 2 and then finally tier 1. So I didn't want it to be about car development. So let's take a look at the rules here. All right, we'll start out with, again, all of this you can change. Not all of these have I actually changed because some of these things I'm not terribly worried about and don't have strong feelings one way or another on. And we'll talk about those as well. So I started out tier 3, you have short practice and qualifying sessions. Yes, you do qualify now instead of the reverse grid based on driver points. So I put a practice session and a qualifying session in, but both are on the short side. And then the races, again, don't pay any attention to the 55 laps here. That makes no difference. That's the default text in there. But what I did that makes it important is you have an option on race length. And you can do short, medium, or short, standard, and long. And this is a modifier for what we were just looking at on the previous screens about do you want short, medium, or long races. So let's say, for example, that you want we're on short races, so we want 70 miles. Well, this says standard, so it's going to use roughly a 70-mile race. It's going to break that into however many laps it would take to run that number of miles. If we choose a shorter race length here for the series, then that means you won't be running 70 miles. You might be running 55 to 60 miles, depending on what the modifier is for this particular item. So you can, and I've got all the 3 series are on the standard race length, which makes it, again, go back to short, medium, and long distances that I've set up. Pit lane speed limit, I didn't really mess with. I'm pretty sure that's a thing because I don't have a strong feeling one way or another there. The pit crews, I did want it to be sequential. to make it a little bit longer, and it gives you a way to differentiate yourself. If you're able to hire better staff in this series, you'll have quicker pit stops because with sequential pit stops, you put in the fuel first, then you change the tires, then you do any repairs that are needed. So I wanted to give the ability to hire some staff, and as they're improving, you get quicker pit stops, which is a way to get yourself farther up the running order. Okay, then we got standard merit payments. I didn't want this to get too out of hand because you can make the merit payments equal among all the teams, regardless of finishing position, all the way to a huge difference between finishing at the front and finishing at the rear. So I've got this at standard, again, so that you get a little bit of difference in prize money, but not all that much. Okay, then we get points for all the drivers. I don't particularly care for only giving points to the top 5 or top 10 or top whatever. I like giving points to everybody who participates, even if you finish last. So I've got that as the default. Again, the politics of the game are still in play. So any and all of these can be changed as the seasons go on and votes come up during the season. I've got a couple of ways to earn bonus points here. Fastest lap and for pole position. Again, giving yourself and your team a way to differentiate themselves from the pack. Then the road tires and British tires, I really didn't care one way or another. So I left those alone. Pre-distributed tire compounds, this is as opposed to where you have an open choice. If you've been playing the game, you've gotten to tier 1, you'll know that you get to choose the tire compounds for the race. They give you generally, it's either 2 or 3 choices. You can see here it's on 2 choices of dry weather compound, and then you get to choose how many of each that you want. In this case, they're already chosen for you. We're using 2 compounds. There's also a choice of 3. And then you can choose how many tire choices you want or how many total tires you have for a weekend. Right now, this is on 15 because I'm using a little bit longer races. And you're going to use multiple sets of tires. It's not as simple as saying, oh, I'm going to have a 2-stop strategy, so I'm going to use maybe 4 sets of tires for the weekend. Because you have qualifying as well as practice and the race, you're going to use multiple sets. So I give 15, although I may change that and move it down to even 12. But again, that's something you can play around with. I hate the actual physical safety car in this game simply because it takes so long to run caution laps. So in an effort to try to speed things up, I'm using the virtual safety car for that. And then refueling, you've got 3 options there. If I remember correctly, you've got a fuel tank that'll last 40% of the race distance, one that'll last 80%, and then a no refueling allowed altogether, which would be 100% of the race distance. Now, the way the game calculates fuel is it calculates 1.0 of fuel. So 1 unit of fuel per lap is the way it goes. So if you have a 100-lap race, then your fuel tank will hold 40 units of fuel. Now, the good thing is, in general, the limiting factor in the races are going to be not the fuel, but rather the tires. So the fuel really doesn't come into play. I've made some adjustments here and tried to play around a little bit with this, but the game didn't like some of the things I was changing. For example, I wanted to lower it to where you could only have 10% of the race distance, or maybe 60% of the race, or some different things like that. Game didn't quite like all of those, so I've gone back to the default 40, 80, and 100. Driver aids are banned as opposed to being allowed, and the difference here is, and we'll see this in future videos where I'll show you the file where this is elaborated on a little bit more. But whenever you allow driver aids, it simply shrinks the difference, potential difference in lap time between the absolute maximum driver, which would be, all 20s on everything, to the absolute worst drivers, which I guess would have all 0s on everything. There's a number of seconds per lap that those can be spread apart. Well, when driver aids banned, that's maximized. So the best driver can be a lot faster than the slowest driver, but if you allow the driver aids, then the difference between them will be much smaller. And again, all of that is configurable within the game files. Then we come to probably my favorite part of the Tier 3 series. It's now all spec parts. Everything is spec parts. So again, I intend for the Tier 3 series to be all about working on building the HQ for scouting, building the HQ for the different ways of improving your driver skills as well as your staff's skills. And we're going to take a look at that because I've made changes to that as well. So I didn't want you to get bogged down and I didn't want to get bogged down in the idea of having to hurry up and develop a lot of parts. So it saves you money and allows you to use your money on some different things, and hopefully grow your team into a much stronger team by the time you feel ready to move up to tier 2. Okay, let's move on to tier 2. And tier 2, kind of the same thing, with a little bit more, sort of a halfway in between tier 3 and then the all or nothing tier 1. We've got medium length practice and qualifying sessions, the standard length here as well. And then we've got the 6-man pit crews, which will also happen sequentially. So again, gives you an opportunity to stand out a little bit as opposed to the tier 1 we'll take a look at here in the moment, where you're going to have much shorter pit stops. You're going to have high merit payments, so a larger difference in the prize money between from tier 3, where it was more equalized. Same thing with points. Points are given to all drivers. You have the same bonuses in effect: fastest lap and the pole position. The tires I didn't really worry about because I don't really care one way or another on that. You still have the pre-distributed tire compounds, still 2 compounds. This time you only have 12 tire choices, so you're going to have to be a little bit more savvy with how many tires you use during practice and qualifying. Same thing with the virtual safety car only. Refueling here is up to 80% of the race distance. Again, not that you're probably going to be able to use that because the races are longer here, then generally the limiting factor is going to be the tires. How long can you make the tires last, which of course comes back to driver skill, and then your pit crew making quicker pit stops when they do come in. So it gives you a different way to differentiate yourself rather than just on spending money upgrading parts. Driver's aid's also banned here. And then I only have 2 spec parts here. So it's an introduction to developing parts, but you're not thrown at it just all at one time. You still have spec engines and gearboxes, which are the 2 most expensive parts to develop and also the most lengthy to develop. So keep that in mind. So this way you can develop the front and rear wings, you can develop suspension, but you're not going to, and brakes as well, but you're not going to need to get into the most expensive parts. So again, easing you in to the process. And then we have qualifying based grids as you've seen in tier 3. Now we go to tier 1. Tier 1 is basically a free-for-all. You have long practice sessions, long qualifying sessions, standard race length again here, and pit lane speed limit, didn't worry about that. Unlimited pit crews, which means that everything is happening all at once. It's organized chaos. So you have much faster pit stops, and pit stops that can be in the range of 4 to 6 seconds as opposed to 10 to 12 seconds. You have high merit payments once again, points for all the drivers. Tires, once again, I didn't really mess with. You have your free choice of tire compounds, and you got 3 compounds to use. Now that's important because the refueling will allow you maybe to use a harder compound and try to stay out on the track longer as opposed to just using the softer compounds. But again, that's all strategy, and who knows, I may decide to change that as time goes on. I've made changes to several of these things as I've done various iterations of the testing. We still have the virtual safety car. Refueling gets you up to 40% of the race distance. Driver's aids are still banned, and the qualifying based grids. So that gives you a basic look at how easy it is to change everything. Everything you just saw is easily configurable at a moment's notice. I mean, realistically, folks, you can be, if you decide right now that you want to mod, within 30 minutes, you'll have everything you need, and you'll know exactly where to go and what to change in the files. So it would not take much or would not take long. We're going to go ahead and choose the European series. As I said, I'm going to actually play through this series whenever I'm done with the video. So I'm going to go ahead and start at the bottom. Now, again, nothing has changed here as far as the graphics. All the icons are still the same. All the graphics still the same. The one change I have made that you can't see here, I'm going to choose the ZRT Motorsport or Autosport, whatever they call it. And the reason I'm going to choose that is because it's a US-based team, and I just enjoy playing it out that way. But the one thing I've done is that I've changed the name from ZRT to Knee-Pit Gaming. And we'll be able to see that here immediately when the game loads up and we get back to our home screen. Okay, so here we are on the home screen. We'll come into the mail, and you notice that it says "Welcome to Knee Pit Gaming," and then all of the references that you'll see in the tweets that you see around the racetrack, as well as the emails, will refer to the team name as Knee Pit Gaming, reflecting the change that I made. But all the graphics will still have the same logos as ZRT. So we've got the normal stuff here. Now, here is where I want to point out something else that I've done that's outside of just the normal changes that I've done to the files. And that is to use random drivers, random mechanics, and random designers. If you go to racedepartment.com, again, a simple Google search will get you where you need to go. Just type in something like Motorsport Manager mods, or modding will get you where you need to go. Racedepartment.com is where you can find it, and there is a program that you download that will enable you to randomize the drivers, designers, and the other staff that you have. And the reason this is so good is because if you've played multiple careers in the game, you'll know that it keeps pulling from the same pool of drivers and various other staff. Well, that can get kind of boring because it means that you sort of know what's coming. You know who the drivers are that you want to look for, the ones you want to pick, and the same thing with the various staff and designers. Everybody gets their favorites that they want to choose from, and then they grab those. Well, in an effort to try to make things fresh and new for me, I got the randomizer, and I'm using it. So as of right now, all of this is randomized with a few exceptions, and that's what we're going to talk about right now. The game does, you notice I have Sergio, and he is the starting driver, or one of the starting drivers for ZRT in the default game. Well, the reason he's still here is the game does have sort of a storyline and a history that they try to portray to you as you begin a game. So what they're doing is the storyline of ZRT is that they have this, hotshot young driver that they've got, but he's got some personality issues. And so they want to see if he will be a great addition to the team or if he's going to be the beginning of the end. So it's sort of a storyline thing. So he remains in there. I'm sure somewhere in the game files you can change even that, but I've not messed with that. But you'll notice that if you're familiar with our Let's Play series, or if you've played as ZRT Motorsport in the game, you'll notice that this is not the second driver that you normally have. This is a very different one. Now, another thing you can do in the randomizer is you can determine the percentage of male and female on the various drivers and staff positions. I have gone with, I think it was about 75% male. And that was, again, just to sort of mix things up again. Having the female drivers and female staff members didn't bother me one bit. In fact, for the most part, I forgot that it was even a difference as you get going through there because they're all just drivers and staff to me. But I decided to skew it a little bit more toward male. The next time I do it and randomize and start a new career, I may do it toward the female side. Who knows? But you do have that option. So what we see here is Sergio. Now, what does change from time to time is Sergio's abilities. Now, if we go look at his traits, you can notice these are the same traits. And again, that's part of the backstory and the storyline for this particular team. And you'll find, I'm sure, that it's the same thing for the other teams as well. But what you notice here is, as you randomize it, I have seen Sergio in testing come out, and he didn't have this amount of ability. I've seen it before where he was basically maxed out at 3 stars, and you really couldn't do much with him, which meant I had to get rid of him pretty quickly because he wasn't going to be effective in Tier 2 and particularly in Tier 1. So this does change, and then what happens is all of the stats for the various drivers change. So you might see a driver name that you recognize, but he might be a completely different driver. There aren't as many pay drivers by doing it this way. The marketability, I've noticed, is generally quite a bit lower on average for the drivers. Again, just like always, you would find, just as you would expect, you'll have some drivers with a marketability that is, up 90 to 100%, while others are at 0 to 10%. Most of them are somewhere in the middle, which is basically what you would expect whenever you get a randomized choice. You would expect most of the things to be somewhere in the middle. All right, so we've got randomized staff, we've got randomized drivers. So you never know exactly what you're going to get here. And even if you do get the same particular person that comes out, they might have a very different uh, loadout for the number of stars that they can obtain in the future. So a lot of randomization, and I really, really am enjoying that. I've done this a couple of times now, and it's a lot of fun to get in and really do a lot of scouting and try to see who the good drivers are on any particular playthrough. So I'm really enjoying that. Now, the last thing I want to mention from the end game side of these things is if we come over to the HQ. Now, we all know you start a new game, you've got your design center and your factory. Even that's configurable. You can always start your team out with maxed out HQ if you want. But I left that alone. The changes I made are in how the new buildings and the various upgrades are done. What I've done is I've changed which buildings will be used to increase your various driver stats and which buildings are for part development for your car. And the reason I did this is because some of these things in the default game didn't make a lot of sense to me. For example, when I think about driver development, I think of simulator and test track. Because if you want to improve your driver's stats, then you can put them on the simulator, which a lot of teams are doing these days. They'll have their drivers, drive all the laps that they can before a particular race weekend to get used to the track. So it makes sense to me that you would use the simulator as a way to improve your driver stats. But if you want to improve your driver stats at a much more accelerated rate, there's nothing better than the real thing, and that's the test track. Okay, so what I've done is I said, look, if you want to have a base level of increase on your drivers, but you don't have a ton of money at the beginning, then go for the simulator. But if you want to really increase your driver stats at a greatly accelerated rate, I believe it's 3 times is the number I've used. So you build the test track. Okay, and as you can see, based on the money, and most of this on the money, I believe is all the same. I don't think I've changed any of the money on it, even though it's very easy to do. So if you want to increase driver stats, you'll build simulator, test track, and then of course upgrade those, but also the staff center. Now the staff center sort of gets lost in the default game because most of us will just end up getting staff that are already extremely good, and you don't really need number one to get them that much better, because as you progress through the tiers you keep getting new staff. But on the flip side of that, also the game really doesn't develop staff and drivers very quickly at all, so I have greatly accelerated that. Again, I believe on this iteration it is to the tune of triple the speed, and maybe even more than that depending on how you use the various buildings. So the breakdown is, if you want to increase, let's go back to the driver tab for this, and we'll go in to Sergio. If you want to increase your driver's braking, cornering, smoothness, overtaking, and consistency, then you've got 2 buildings that will do that. Okay, you've got the test track, which will do it the absolute quickest, or you can build the simulator, which will also build it, particularly as you upgrade these. If you want adaptability, fitness, feedback, and focus, then you will need to build the staff center. And the reasoning behind that, again, some of this isn't exactly what I would prefer to do, but I'm trying to work within the framework of what the game gives me and trying to make use of all the buildings. But the staff center to me makes sense that that's where you can have the weight room and a lot of ways to increase the fitness. Feedback, I would imagine that because your other staff members are already using the staff center, if the driver goes in, it would be an opportunity to increase the communication skills between them and the staff. So you increase feedback, and then focus and adaptability are sort of along for the ride. And I'm sure you can think of some sort of way to tie those in to the staff center as well. So that's how I broke it apart. 3 buildings in total will get you everything you need on driver improvement and staff improvement. The other buildings no longer make any difference for your drivers or staff. So let's go back and take a look at those. You'll notice that the new buildings no longer require you, or at least for the most part, no longer require you to upgrade your design center or the factory to a certain level before you can unlock these buildings. And the reason I did that is because some of these buildings, it made no sense to me to have them tied to upgrading other facilities. For example, the test track, I can build the test track even before I have a factory if I wanted to. May not be the smartest thing to do, but I could. Same thing with the simulator. These are both intended for our drivers now, so they're both open from the very beginning. Forecasting center and scouting facility, I haven't really made any changes to, other than I believe I made a couple of changes to how long it takes to build them. Same thing for the staff center. Not a lot going on there, except for the changes I've already mentioned. But then I've also unlocked the helipad, road car factory, and theme park, because once again, these don't relate really to factories or the design center in my mind, so I went ahead and unlocked those. Now granted, the road car factory and theme park are extremely expensive and are likely to be the last two things you do build, but it didn't make sense to me to have them tied to anything in particular other than needing a certain amount of money to build them. Same thing with the tour center. It really didn't make any sense. I mean, if your team facility is this huge area of land, so you can build this whenever you want. All right, then we come to the buildings that actually affect how the car is developed. Now you'll notice that these are grayed out right now, and you can't build these. And the reason I did this is because I wanted to have sort of a step process to do this. Now you can upgrade your factory. Factory does nothing except affect the factory. Okay, and of course it's always good to upgrade your factory because it lets you get parts, particularly the reliability, increased very quickly. So it's its own thing. It's its own building now. The design center, on the other hand, I really wanted to give it a purpose. Unfortunately, I've yet to figure out exactly how that works. So for now, it's not doing exactly what I want, which is to, as you upgrade it, it reduces the time it takes to develop parts. For example, a level 1 design center, which you start off with by default, won't give you any decrease in time. But say when you increase to level 2, you upgrade this building, you get 1 day taken off of all the development time. Level 3, 2 days off, and then level 4, 3 days off, or something like that. Again, you can make it whatever you want, but that's sort of the idea I had in my head. I haven't quite found that yet, but I've gone ahead and put the rest of the plan in place so that it will be there whenever I'm ready or whenever I find the particular area that allows that. So let's talk about the buildings that will be dictating the different parts development for the car. Brakes, still do brakes. The brake facility still upgrades the brakes. So nothing has really changed there, but you do need to upgrade your design center to level 2 in order to access this. Okay, the handling center still does the suspension, and it also is unlocked once you upgrade your design center to a level 2. But then things start to change. Okay, the wind tunnel at design level 2, however, the telemetry center is design level 3. And the reason why that's important is because of some changes I've made. Now, the wind tunnel is now responsible for the front and the rear wings. Both of them are now controlling the wind tunnel. And the reason is because it didn't make sense to me that a team would spend all the money to build a wind tunnel, but only work on one of the two wings in it. So now they are both researched in the wind tunnel. But then you come over to the telemetry center, and it is used for both engines and gearboxes. And of course, you have to do some upgrading to your design center before you can get to that. The good news is, with the way that the different tiers in the series are set up, you won't need to get to it for quite a while. Again, all of this is set up to give a logical flow, again, logical to me anyway, a logical flow for how you could build a team from the ground up, starting with just the basics of a design center and a factory, and then progressing by building the various facilities before you reach tier 1, and where you're going to need all of this. So it gives you plenty of time to do it rather than having to be in a rush to do it all at one time. So that's sort of the thinking behind it. Those are some of the changes I've made thus far. Again, I continue to look through the files to see what else I can find. I've found the files for the different parts and the different upgrades to those as you do part development. So there's a lot of things to change. This is simply the only things that I've decided to change to this point, but it's a very fluid situation. Who knows? I might decide tomorrow to change, the layout of some of these things and some of the dependencies on them. But hopefully you get a better idea through this video on some of the things that you can change, and really how many things there are to change already, even without them opening up the Steam Workshop, and hopefully along with that, opening up the game so that modding becomes even easier to do. So hope you enjoyed it. Stay tuned. The next videos that you're going to see in this series about Motorsport Manager modding are going to be about the behind the scenes, where I'll actually show you the file, open up the file, and show you the lines that I changed to make all of this happen. Thank you once again for joining me, and stay tuned for more Motorsport Manager.